The year is 216 BC. Two mighty powers, Rome and Carthage, are locked in a titanic struggle for control of the Mediterranean. This was the Second Punic War, a conflict born from old rivalries and broken treaties. Carthage, a naval power based in what's now Tunisia, had been defeated by the rising Roman Republic in the First Punic War. They lost territory and paid a heavy price. This humiliation bred a deep-seated desire for revenge, a feeling personified by one man, Hannibal Barca. He was a military genius, commander of Carthage's armies, and a man who had sworn a sacred oath as a boy to be a lifelong enemy of Rome. Hannibal knew that fighting Rome on their own terms at sea was a losing game, so he devised a plan of breathtaking audacity. He would not wait for Rome to bring the fight to him. Instead, he would take the war directly to the heart of the Roman Republic, to Italy itself. In 218 BC, he gathered a formidable army in Spain, a force complete with cavalry, infantry, and his now legendary war elephants. His goal was to march this army over land, crossing two of Europe's great natural barriers, the Pyrenees Mountains and, most famously, the treacherous snow-covered Alps. It was an undertaking that many considered impossible, a logistical nightmare of the highest order. The journey was brutal, a testament to Hannibal's sheer force of will and his soldiers' loyalty. They faced hostile tribes, perilous mountain passes, and the biting cold of the Alpine winter. Thousands of men and nearly all the elephants perished along the way. Yet, against all odds, Hannibal descended into the Po Valley of northern Italy with a corps of hardened, veteran soldiers. He had done the unthinkable. He was on Roman soil, a predator in their backyard. This shocking arrival sent a wave of panic through Rome and set the stage for one of history's most famous military confrontations. Hannibal immediately proved his genius. He won two significant victories against the Romans at the battles of the Trebia and Lake Trasimene. He used clever tactics and ambushes to outsmart the more straightforward Roman commanders. These stunning defeats wounded Roman pride and cost them tens of thousands of soldiers. Rome, however, was not a power to be trifled with. They were resilient, resourceful, and furious. They decided to put an end to the Carthaginian menace once and for all. They raised the largest army they had ever fielded, determined to find Hannibal and crush him with overwhelming force. The final destination for this epic clash would be a dusty, sun-baked plain in southern Italy, near a small village called Cannae. The battlefield of Cannae was located in Apulia, a region in the heel of Italy's boot. The landscape was defined by the Aufidus River, now known as the Ofanto, which snaked its way through a wide, flat, and largely treeless plain. This terrain was crucial. For the Romans, a wide open field seemed perfect. It offered plenty of room for their massive legions to deploy in their traditional, powerful formations. They believed that on such a battlefield, their superior numbers and the sheer weight of their heavy infantry would simply steamroll Hannibal's smaller army. There would be no room for the tricks and ambushes that had defeated them before. It was to be a straightforward test of strength. Hannibal, however, saw the plain differently. He was a master of using terrain to his advantage, and he chose this spot deliberately. While the Romans saw an open space for a simple head-on collision, Hannibal saw a giant canvas on which he could paint his tactical masterpiece. He understood that the flat ground was absolutely ideal for his superior cavalry. His skilled Numidian and Spanish horsemen needed room to maneuver, to outflank, and to encircle an enemy. The hills that flanked the plain were too far away for the Romans to anchor their lines, leaving their sides vulnerable. The river, meanwhile, would serve to secure one of his own flanks as he deployed his army. The weather on that fateful day, August 2, 216 BC, also played a subtle but important role. The region was known for a hot, dry wind called the Vulturnus. On the day of the battle, this wind blew from the southeast, directly into the faces of the advancing Roman soldiers. It kicked up clouds of dust and grit from the parched earth, stinging their eyes and reducing visibility. This seemingly minor detail would become a significant disadvantage for the Roman legionaries. They would be marching into the sun and into a dust storm, all while facing a determined enemy. It was another small piece of the puzzle that Hannibal expertly fitted into his plan. So, the stage was set. The Romans, confident in their brute strength and numerical superiority, marched onto a field they believed was perfect for them. They saw a simple, flat expanse where victory was assured. Hannibal, the cunning tactician, had lured them into what he intended to turn into a killing field. He had selected the ground not for a simple clash of infantry, but for a complex ballet of movement, retreat, and encirclement. The Aufidus River, the open plain, and even the wind were all instruments in his orchestra of war, and he was about to conduct his magnum opus. The Cannae cauldron was ready. When we compare the two armies that met at Cannae, it looks like a classic mismatch on paper. The Roman Republic had marshaled an immense force, arguably the largest single army it had ever put into the field. It was commanded by two consuls, Lucius Aemilius Paullus and Gaius Terentius Varro, who rotated command on a daily basis. Under them were approximately 80,000 infantry and about 6,000 cavalry. The core of this army was the Roman legionary, a disciplined, heavily armed and armored citizen soldier. They were the backbone of Roman military might, trained to fight in dense, powerful formations. The Romans were supremely confident that this colossal wave of humanity could crush anything in its path. Facing this behemoth was Hannibal's Carthaginian army, a much smaller and far more diverse force. He commanded around 40,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry. Unlike the homogeneous Roman legions, Hannibal's army was a multinational coalition of warriors. He had veterans from his campaigns in Spain, including fierce Iberian swordsmen. He had Gallic tribesmen from northern Italy who had joined his cause, eager to fight their Roman conquerors. The heart of his infantry was a corps of highly trained Libyan spearmen, equipped with captured Roman armor. This mix of cultures, languages, and fighting styles could have been a weakness, but under Hannibal's charismatic leadership, it became a versatile and cohesive strength. The most significant difference between the two forces lay in their cavalry. The Romans viewed cavalry as a secondary arm, primarily used for scouting or chasing off a beaten enemy. Their 6,000 horsemen were largely made up of Roman nobles and Italian allies, and they were no match for what Hannibal possessed. In contrast, Hannibal understood the critical importance of cavalry as a decisive battle-winning tool. His 10,000 horsemen were the best in the world. They included heavy cavalry from Spain and Gaul, led by his brother Hasdrubal, and the peerless light cavalry of the Numidians from North Africa, commanded by the brilliant Maharbal. These were skilled riders who could skirmish, charge, and maneuver with deadly precision. The leadership styles also presented a stark contrast. The Roman command was divided and inconsistent. Paullus was cautious and wary of Hannibal's cunning, while Varro was impetuous and eager for a decisive, glorious victory. This internal conflict led to a fatal decision to fight on Varro's day of command. On the other side, Hannibal was in absolute control. His men were fanatically loyal to him, having followed him across the Alps and through multiple victories. He knew the capabilities of every single unit in his diverse army, from the wild charge of the Gauls to the steadfast discipline of his Libyans. He was a single, brilliant mind directing a complex military machine. This unity of command would prove to be one of his greatest assets. Hannibal's battle plan for Cannae is now legendary, a model of tactical perfection studied by generals for millennia. He knew he could not win a simple head-on fight against the sheer mass of the Roman legions. So he had to use cunning and deception to turn Rome's greatest strength, its numbers, into its greatest weakness. His plan was designed to deliberately invite a Roman attack, control its direction, and then spring a trap from which there was no escape. It was a high-risk, high-reward strategy that relied on the precise execution of every phase and the discipline of his troops, especially his weakest ones. The core of his plan involved an unusual and seemingly weak formation. The Romans deployed their infantry in a deep, narrow rectangle designed to punch through the enemy center with overwhelming force. In response, Hannibal arranged his infantry in a completely different way. He placed his least reliable troops, the Gauls and the Spanish, in the center of his line. Furthermore, he pushed this central section forward, creating a shallow crescent or convex bulge that bowed out towards the advancing Romans. This formation looked vulnerable, an inviting target for the legions to smash. It was the bait for his trap. On the flanks of this weak center, hidden from the Romans' initial view and held back in reserve, he placed his best troops. These were his veteran Libyan spearmen, armed and armored like Roman legionaries. They were positioned in deep columns, ready to move when the time was right. The final and most critical element of his plan involved his cavalry. He placed his superior heavy Spanish and Gallic cavalry on his left flank, directly opposite the weaker Roman cavalry. On his right flank he positioned his swift Numidian light cavalry. His instructions were simple. The cavalry must win their fight quickly and then swing around to attack the Roman rear. The entire concept was a brilliant piece of military psychology. Hannibal anticipated exactly what the arrogant Roman commanders would do. He knew they would see the bulging thin line of Gauls and Spanish as the weak point and pour all their strength into breaking it. The plan was for this center to slowly give way under the immense pressure, but not break. As they fell back, they would draw the packed Roman legions deeper and deeper into a pocket. The Roman formation, so powerful when advancing, would become a compressed, helpless mob as the trap closed around them. Hannibal was not just fighting an army, he was exploiting the very nature of Roman military doctrine. The battle unfolded exactly as Hannibal had planned. The massive Roman legions with Varro at their head surged forward, crashing into the thin crescent of Gauls and Spanish soldiers. The Carthaginian center buckled under the immense pressure, groaning and giving way. For the Romans, it must have felt like the beginning of a glorious victory. They pushed deeper and deeper, their ranks becoming more and more compressed as they funneled into the collapsing pocket. But the Carthaginian line did not break. It performed a controlled, disciplined retreat, bending from a convex crescent into a concave one, pulling the Romans ever further into the trap. While the Roman infantry was focused on the center, the decisive action was happening on the wings. On Hannibal's left, his heavy cavalry, led by Hasdrubal, shattered their Roman counterparts. They didn't just defeat them, they annihilated them, and then, instead of pursuing them off the field, Hasdrubal executed his orders perfectly. He wheeled his victorious horsemen around the back of the entire Roman army to attack the allied cavalry on the other wing, who were already engaged with the Numidians. Caught from two sides, the second Roman cavalry force was also destroyed. The battlefield was now cleared of Roman horsemen. Hannibal's cavalry was free to complete the encirclement, with the Roman legions now packed shoulder to shoulder in the center. Unable to even lift their arms to swing their swords, the trap was sprung. Hannibal's veteran Libyan infantry, who had been held in reserve on the flanks, now turned inward and attacked the exposed sides of the Roman formation. At the same time, Hannibal's victorious cavalry slammed into the Roman rear. The trap was complete, the Roman army was surrounded on all sides. What had begun as a battle descended into a one-sided massacre. The great Roman legions, the pride of the Republic, were transformed into a helpless, terrified mob, slaughtered where they stood for hours. The results were catastrophic for Rome. Ancient sources estimate that between 50,000 and 70,000 Roman soldiers were killed, including the consul Lucius Aemilius Paullus and 80 Roman senators. It was one of the single deadliest days in military history. Hannibal's losses, by contrast, were remarkably light, perhaps around 6,000 men, mostly the Gauls who had borne the brunt of the initial Roman charge. Despite this staggering victory, Hannibal made the controversial decision not to march on the city of Rome itself. He lacked the siege equipment and logistical support to take the heavily fortified city, and he hoped the defeat would force the Romans to sue for peace. But Rome did not surrender. Instead, they mourned, regrouped, and adopted a new strategy of avoiding direct battle with Hannibal while slowly reconquering Italy. The Battle of Cannae did not win the war for Carthage, but its legacy was sealed. It remains the textbook example of a perfect tactical victory, a masterclass in strategy, and a chilling reminder of the genius of Hannibal Barca.